It's late at night in the mid-2000s. Your parents are asleep, the lights are off, the room is quiet, except for this. When you hear that, what do you feel? Maybe you feel homesick, maybe you feel nostalgic. For most of us, the PS2 wasn't just an entertainment system. In some really odd way, it had a hand in shaping our identity. From the blue void, to the drifting towers, to the orbs of time, there truly was something indescribable about the PS2's interface. And today, I'm going to attempt to describe it. Before we understand the PS2, we need to rewind to a different time, when gaming was still seen as a kid's thing. Up to the mid-90s, consoles didn't just look like toys, they behaved like toys. Systems like the N64 and Saturn leaned into bright colors and playful menus designed to grab your attention. These systems weren't trying to establish authority, they were trying to invite you in. And the original PlayStation mostly fit right in. Its logo was cartoonish and its startup sound was bright and open. But its interface was more quiet, more restrained. And that restraint mattered. By the late 90s, something was changing, and not just with Sony. The people who grew up with the NES, the SNES, the PS1, they weren't kids anymore, and they weren't putting down the controller. Gaming was really starting to shed its kid's toy reputation. Games were getting complex, dealing with war, trauma, identity, and loss. Sony saw the shift and in September 1999 responded with the PlayStation 2. The messaging felt different than before. It was colder, more mature, industrial. Even the advertising reflected that tone. But all of that was just context. The real revolution didn't happen on a stage or in a commercial. It happened the moment someone turned on a PS2. The screen begins in what appears to be a dark blue volumetric void, a layered spatial gradient suggesting depth rather than surface. Instead of just a page, the PS2 UI is a space. Within it, 4 softly glowing colors. The floating cubes which mature into elongated towers are not just decoration, but a procedural visualization of play history. The more a game is played, the taller its tower becomes, and the more games you insert, the wider the horizontal spread. The result is a minimalist cityscape of memory. Your personal gaming history becomes a skyline. What Sony did here, consciously or not, was turn the player's time into a spatial artifact. Even the decision to hide this system, to not document it in manuals, is consistent. This wasn't meant to be a feature that the player manages. It was meant to be something they noticed slowly, subconsciously, after months. In my opinion, one of the most overlooked aspects of the PS2 boot is its neutrality. It's not themed after any particular game, genre, or audience. Instead, it offers a conceptual space that can belong to any game, any genre. Sports, RPG, action, horror, it doesn't matter. It's a universal gateway. Finally, the sound settles and the PS2 accepts your disc. But what if it doesn't? The calm blue void crumbles and suddenly you're in a red chamber. The cubes, which in the blue world slowly rise into memory towers, stop growing. They stop transforming. They just float, rigid and indifferent. Instead of reflecting your play history, they now feel like sterile constructs, symbols of the PS2's internal rules. The soundtrack collapses into something much harsher. Instead of a tonal chord, you get destabilized frequencies, a sonic texture that feels uncomfortable and wrong. Then the command appears. Please insert a PlayStation or PlayStation 2 format disc. The PS2 doesn't say, I can't read this. It says, you inserted the wrong thing. It's accusatory. In the blue space, the system feels collaborative, but in the red space, your relationship is severed. The console is not welcoming you through the gateway. It's denying you passage. So you remove the disc and you're greeted with orbs? Black screen, 2 options, and behind them 7 blue orbs, swirling, moving what looks through an endless void. Most players, including myself, ignored them as background decoration, something to fill the space while you fix the problem or find another game. But if you stayed there long enough, if you really watched them, you'd start to notice something. The PS2's orbs aren't a decoration, they're a clock, a fully functioning, mathematically precise, hidden analog clock that Sony never documented. implemented. There are 7 orbs representing the 7 days of the week. They visualize time grouping themselves according to the lowest common denominator of 60. At 0 seconds, all the orbs collapse into 1. 30 seconds in and they split into 2. At 20 and 40 seconds, they form 3 groups. The minute divided into thirds. At 15 and 45, 4 clusters. At 12, 24, 36, and 48, they form 5 groups. Those are the smallest visible fractions. Beneath everything, there's always that low, continuous audio bed. Slow, echoing waves, never resolving, endlessly looping. It isn't music. It has no melody that you can really follow. And there's no cue telling you when something begins or ends. However, it helps give the space a sense of presence. And when the CMOS battery in your PS2 dies, the internal clock gets stuck at 0. The orbs stop moving entirely, and it feels deeply unsettling. Not because you understand what the orbs represent, but because their stillness makes the PS2 feel hollow, like the console lost its pulse. Oh, and by the way, this is not documented anywhere. This is something that users found out on their own. Select system configuration, and suddenly the space transforms. The black void becomes a purple gradient. The orbs are still there, counting time the exact same way, but now they're accompanied by something new. 12 crystalline glass rods, hexagonal and translucent, arranged in a circle around the orbs like the face of an analog clock, because that's exactly what they are. The entire structure appears to be gently descending, falling through an endless wormhole, rotating 360 degrees every 60 seconds. At the top of each hour, the corresponding rod fills with liquid, and as the minutes pass, it slowly drains. Moreover, the sphere in which the orbs rotate expands gradually throughout the hour, growing larger until the next hour arrives and the cycle continues. But even here, in the one menu where you can adjust the time, Sony still never explains how the orbs work. They just show you the mechanism and let you watch. Let you realize slowly, if at all, that the PS2 has been counting every second you've spent with it since the day you turned it on. Let's go back and select browser. The orbs disappear. What remains is a flat gray screen with 2 objects, memory card 1 and memory card 2. There is no decoration, no depth, and no attempt to maintain atmosphere. This is intentional. The browser removes abstraction and presents the PS2 as a system. Selecting a memory card reveals the PS2's core design choice. Save data is not presented as data. Instead of file names or lists, the system displays 3-dimensional objects provided by each game. Player control here is partial. You can manage saves, but not the record of your activity. This establishes an asymmetry. The system remembers more than it allows you to change. It's not designed for efficiency, it's made to formalize memory. It treats time spent as something accumulated, preserved, and potentially lost. Where the startup visualizes history and the idle state represents time passing, the browser is where time becomes record. Across every part of its interface, the PlayStation 2 presents itself as a system first. It does not guide you, it does not explain itself, it does not adapt to comfort you. It establishes rules and boundaries and expects you to follow them. The interface is minimal, but not simple. It operates more like architecture than software. And over time, you begin to understand it not through instructions, but through exposure. Through sitting in that black void at 2 a.m., through watching the orbs drift, through seeing your towers get taller and not knowing why, and hearing waves crash while you decided which game to play. And so it lingered. Because let's be real, the PS2 didn't just store saves. It stored every late night, every disc you inserted. It built an entire skyline of your childhood just for you. Sony, the PS2, they didn't care if you understood it. They didn't need you to. It just did its job. It kept running, recording, waiting. But somewhere, your PS2 is still there. The towers are still standing. The orbs would still be moving if only you turned it on. So years later, when you hear that startup sound, you don't just remember games. You remember being a kid in a dark room, sitting 2 feet from a TV, and feeling, for reasons you can't explain, like you were standing at the edge of something greater. The PS2 didn't need to be friendly. It needed to be unforgettable, and it was. Thank you so much for watching. I would love your feedback. If I got anything wrong, feel free to correct me. You can support me on this channel, on TikTok, and on Instagram under the same username. Yalla, salam. Forgot to mention, I'm KFC Chicken Slayer. Look at these great games. Man, we love the PS2. The best controller, the best console. Thank you.